Welcome to my Veganuary daily vlogs. The first video I'm going to do is about my journey to becoming vegan. It all started years ago when I was at vet school, and I saw a number of things during my studies that were quite confronting. I still have a very vivid memory of being in a piggery and seeing the farrowing pens where the mothers were kept very confined, unable to move around while their babies were little and nursing off them. So they're in stalls, they could lie down one way or the other, and that was all they could do. They couldn't turn around. And that was really quite upsetting, seeing how they were kept, and knowing that that's the norm in the intensive meat industry for pigs. And once the babies were old enough, they were then taken off the mothers and put into little, quite small nursery pens with no environmental enrichment, and the babies would bite each other's tails, and hence they cut their tails off and cut their teeth off so that they can't cause damage to each other. But knowing that the only reason they were doing that was because they weren't being raised in a natural environment, they weren't with their mums, they weren't anywhere where there was stimulation or anything that was contributing to their happiness and well-being. And so that was the first experience I had that really opened my eyes to the meat industry and the reality of what goes on, and that sort of started my journey. And although it was many years before I became a solid 100% committed vegan after that, that was sort of the initial trigger that started the thought processes for me. And we also had to visit slaughterhouses as part of our studies as a vet, and again I saw a lot of things that were really confronting, and a lot of stuff that I think people aren't aware of when it comes to what's bought in a tray at a supermarket and what's presented on a plate at dinner time. And there is really genuinely a lot of suffering and trauma behind that, and there's no way around that. That's just part of the economics of producing meat, and it's delusional to think that it can be any other way unless you're producing your own, I guess, in a very small holding type situation. And even then, obviously, there's going to be trauma involved when you're taking the life of an animal that isn't willingly giving it up. So that was the beginning for me. I did go vegan at that point, but then I did so just from an animal rights perspective. I didn't have any understanding of the nutritional benefits or why the plant-based diet is actually what we as a species are designed to eat. And so it was a number of years later, and in that time frame I had started eating meat again because I was living in an area where there was humane meat available, and then I started drinking milk again because again we were in a farming area where there was humane milk available, and that whole humane washing is something that I'll cover in another vlog. So yeah, I was back eating animal products, and then the next sort of step, I guess, for me was we had our first child, and so I became more interested in health and wellness and the truth behind the causes of that. And so I started looking more into diet and nutrition. And as a vet, I was very aware of the anatomy and the physiology of different species, and we'd studied that for 2 years as part of our 5-year degree. And I was recommending species-appropriate diets for my patients, raw diets that they were designed by nature to eat. And I started to become curious about, well, what is a human supposed to eat? What food are our bodies actually designed to thrive on? And so I started researching that, and during that time I went to a raw yoga retreat on Stradbroke Island with an amazing woman and mother and yoga instructor called Kath Ford, who at that stage had one daughter and now has two, and she was raising them mostly raw vegan, 100% vegan, mostly raw. And her health and the health of her daughter and the vibrancy and the compassion just blew me away. It oozed out of them, and that really ignited my interest and sort of sent me deeper down the rabbit hole of what are we supposed to eat. And so through further reading and research and looking at numerous different studies and books on the subject, I discovered the truth. And it's not a belief, it's not an opinion, it's the truth. There's no getting around that. When you look at how nature has designed an animal, and we are an animal, and what nature has provided for that animal to eat, you look at the human anatomy and the physiology of our bodies, and it becomes very clear that we are a plant-eating species, and I will cover that in the next video as well. And so that was becoming very clear. I had a lot of clarity around that, but it was still difficult for me to give up cultural beliefs or questions at the back of my mind about iron and calcium and all those sorts of things that we hear. And subsequently had another 2 babies, and throughout that time was transitioning more and more towards a plant-based diet. And then when I had my 3rd child and I was breastfeeding, I suddenly had that realization of, I was a mammal, I'm producing milk for my baby, she's nursing, it's such a special time. One of my favourite parts of motherhood is those milky years, and I really at that point connected in with the pain and the suffering and everything that animals like dairy cows and other animals that we consume or rely on for various reasons that we don't actually require or need in the first place, what they were going through. And as a mother, that was very eye-opening for me to really connect into that. And so at that point it really just became, there was no other excuse anymore. There was nothing else to argue. There was nothing left in me to worry or become anxious about or think that there must be something else that I need. It just became a really easy decision for me to go vegan, and so that's what happened. And I'm so glad that I had that realization and that awareness came to me, and the journey since then has been unfolding in a way that I'm really grateful for. I've met some amazing people, I've connected with some really like-minded souls, and I just am at so much peace knowing that our family values, that we're living them, that we're authentically connected with what's true and what feels right. And I think that's what we all need. We really need to start connecting into that truth and what really feels right. Because when you tap right down into that, it doesn't feel right to eat an animal or to consume their milk that wasn't meant for us in the first place, to keep them in conditions that are horrific, that are traumatic, that there's just simply no way around that from an economic perspective, and we don't need it. So we're all thriving, we're all exceptionally healthy. My kids are wild and beautiful and very connected into empathy and compassion, and it just makes me really happy to have found this journey, and I hope to share more with you over the next 30 days. So sign up for Veganuary if you're inspired and start trying it. See how it feels for you, how it feels for your family. Start doing your own research, start looking into why, and see if you can connect in with that and discover the truth for yourself.